Why not learn from environment? Yeah, easy papers, just yeah, in our background is everything is as is, but here you know what says, and this is what we are doing. You have to see what they are doing. Why not we are doing? You know, we have to change it. Several changes needed from the environment.
Are there different attitudes and stages to the way that male circumcision is performed?
Going into puberty. So again, it varies. And you know, many people do link FGM and male circumcision. I don't understand that one. It's always one there on my case. But I mean, it's a completely different thing. Male circumcision and FGM. For instance, if you look at FGM, cutting off the labia, that's equivalent to cutting off the whole man's stuff, and they wouldn't like that. So
it seems to be a much bigger act of betrayal, but I'm not myself in favour of male circumcision either. But it's just that act of betrayal and that development of human consciousness just taking place between the age of 5 and 10.
And the one, yes, I get your point, but one of the other differences between male circumcision and female circumcision, like I've mentioned, female circumcision is not based on any religion requirement, whereas male circumcision, there are justifications on a religious basis why certain religious group do it. And so that brings that difference, completely different perspective there. So which is why it's very difficult when we want to talk about male circumcision, because that can be based on the Quran or the Jewish religion, Christianity. Living in Scotland are from countries where FGM is performed. So it just shows that, you know, it is an issue for people living here, both for women who may come from these countries who've already been affected by FGM and their children if they are at risk of FGM as well. And out of that number, in 2012, 733 children were born in Scotland to mothers who come from one of these 29 countries. So, and out of those numbers, 363 were girls. So you will see why I put that there when we're talking about how to identify children who are at risk of FGM. So they're estimating that between that time, during that year, it was over 300 girls that were born to women from these communities. Now, that doesn't mean that every woman here has had FGM. We don't know that, but we just assuming from the statistics that UNICEF has given that it is a very high prevalence, and then it is an issue for us living in. The law on FGM in Scotland is 2005, so FGM has been outlawed in the UK since in the 80s, but in 2005 the Scotland Act was changed again. So FGM under this Act refers to any of the types that we discussed earlier. If anyone performs this on a woman or a child, then you will be committing a crime and you will be prosecuted, and when found guilty you can serve up to 14 years imprisonment. But the Act also includes for any person to perform FGM outside of the UK to a UK national or permanent resident holder, or to help or support in carrying out any of the acts of FGM. Any comments on that?
Should a female choose to do that and then go free?
If a woman chooses to do that?
Yeah, that's like...
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that. But I'm just hoping you will notice something from reading that. So see here, it said for any person to perform FGM outside of the UK to a national of, so you have to be a resident, a permanent resident holder, you know, with the whole immigration thing, or a UK citizen. So my question is, what happens if I am not a UK resident or I'm not a permanent resident holder and I decide to perform FGM on my daughter? Do I fall in that category? So I was hoping someone was going to ask that. You're not automatically a UK citizen unless your family has you is a UK citizen. I don't know how it
But suppose not somebody just
So-
for say when he want to do it.
Yeah,
For example.
his question. I'll come back to that.
So at the moment, there's an exception.
So
According
there's
to
a
this
loophole
law,
there.
there's a loophole.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a loophole
Like,
there.
for example, like people who are holding a working
Student,
permit,
yeah, or
students,
students, yes.
yeah, who have,
Yeah,
so this law doesn't cover them. If
exactly.
they have it, they are not committing a crime at the moment.
Well, unless they use like the child protection, but still, it's not covered there. So campaigners have been, lobbying for the law to be changed, and the UK government is considering this, and the Scottish government is actually working on changing that to include anybody who lives in Scotland. If you are a habitual resident, it doesn't matter about your immigration status.
Yeah.
You are automatically covered under that law. So they're working on changing that. Now, coming back to that question, it's a very interesting one. But if you look at the definition of FGM, it says if it's performed without medical reasons. So this is very ironical because here a girl could decide, a British girl, a white girl, excuse my language, can decide that I don't like my vagina. My labias are too long, I want them to be trimmed, and it's affecting me psychologically. That woman can go, that child can go on the NHS and they can have their labias cut. It's cosmetic surgery, but here it is based on medical background because she's saying that it's affecting her psychologically. And then again, it's a woman. If you're over the age of 18, it's your choice, it's your body. Whereas FGM is completely different. When it's performed to a young person. Who has no say over what's happening to their body. That's the difference there. But if you wanted to do that, then you have a choice. I don't know if you've all been following the news. Recently, there was a court case about a doctor who performed FGM, and unfortunately, the doctor was freed. He wasn't found guilty. From day one, I knew he wasn't going to be found guilty.
He said he restated the
Yes.
Because he gave a medical reason for it, because he had to stick the woman back up.
Yeah.
So
He should have been prosecuted.
he was prosecuted, but he was found not
He
guilty.
should be found guilty.
No.
The thing is, because he based on the reasons why he performed FGM on the fact that it was to save the woman's life, because the woman had bleeding and she had torn, like she had big tears, and he had to stitch her up. And there were lots of errors, not even from the hospital, because prior to this doctor had no knowledge about FGM. This was the first case of FGM he was confronted with. Throughout his undergraduate course and his medical course, he never had any training on FGM, and then he was left with this woman. And these are the issues that, which why I was saying, I was hoping there are professionals here who work in that area, like healthcare, like social service, because those are the frontline officers who may work with these women. But if they are not aware of how to deal with women, then it becomes an issue. When I was doing my master's, I did my dissertation on FGM, and I spoke to women in Scotland who've had FGM and how they experience obstetric care, and most of the findings of the research indicated that healthcare professionals were not communicating with women about FGM. So when women were pregnant and they went in, they were being asked, the question on the antenatal care thing says, have you had a piercing or operation, or I can't remember the other phrase they use. And to most women, English is not our first language. We come from a community where FGM is not referred to as FGM. So if you're using such terminologies, I wouldn't know what you're referring to. And FGM is not referred to as an operation to most of these women. So they're most likely to think that they've not had FGM, and this was being misstyled.
I think in that case it takes a medical team to react to something, because I've heard of similar cases with very difficult child surgeon, make an emergency call, but nobody wants to inconvenience another professional. They're going to have to get a plastic surgeon out, you could be on holiday, you could be in bed. And these are the thoughts that go through people's heads rather than this woman needs help on the operating table now. Because it seems like the only way that he could have done that repair would have been with a plastic surgeon, and he didn't have the skills to do it.
And you know, in London, in England, down south, they have loads of hospitals, especially in London, where women can go and have reversal. It's called reversal. If you want OD defibrillation, but it's something that we are hoping that would be available in Scotland, because we don't have that here, where women can go unless you're through maternity and they realize that you're defibrillated, then you're off like that. But I don't know how accessible that is to like any woman. So that's another issue.
Are you in touch with the sexual health teams in the NHS?
Yeah, but it's very limited what they can do, like, because we don't have a specialist clinic to refer women. So, for instance, all these complications that I discussed in the previous slides. One thing to remember is that most women don't associate these effects with FGM. So, if you come from a community where every woman has problems with their periods, you tend to believe that this is part of being a woman. You don't think it's because of FGM I'm having this. You would, and for that reason, many women would associate those problems with that until they see someone who explains the issue to them. So when women go to places, then they will be disclosing the issue of FGM. Recently, I heard of a story where a woman who was claiming benefits went to the job center, but she was being basically told. She was being told that she needs to get a job, but every time she got a job, she doesn't last long, because every month she needs time off during her period, and she wasn't going to work, and then she was losing her job, and then the job center is like, you don't want to work, we're not going to pay you, and she had those issues, but she couldn't explain to them the problem because she didn't think they would understand, and those are the issues that people need to do. If you work with women from these communities, you need to bear in mind, you don't just come and assume that this woman doesn't want to work. She's just here for our benefits, when you don't really know why she's in that situation. How are we doing for time? I have no idea what time it is.
20 past. So,
Okay. So identifying girls, this is more for like what's used here, like to identify girls who may be at risk of FGM. So this is the guidelines that they use. So one of the first indicators that a child may be at risk of FGM is if the mother has had FGM. So if a woman has had FGM and they give birth to a girl, this shouldn't, although it's not the case, not everyone who's had FGM wants to perform FGM to their daughters, but it is assumed that if you have had FGM, then that child is considered as being at risk, or if the child has siblings who've already had FGM. If the mother has had given birth and requests re-infibulation, that means infibulation is where the woman is stitched. So if a woman gives birth in the UK, it's illegal for her to be stitched up again. But you would see some people who request for this, because in some parts of Africa, that's what women do. Every time they deliver, they're stitched back up. So, but that is illegal in the UK. So if a mother delivers in a hospital and requests to be infibulated again, then that child, if it's a daughter, then they consider being at risk, because that's showing that this woman wants to stay the way she was. And if parents express views which show that they value the practice, or if they are wishing to travel back to their countries of origin, because when they go back home with their daughters, as most of us know, who come from Africa, the extended family has a lot of influence over what happens to that child. So some women may not want to perform FGM on their daughters, and then they will go home, and then their mothers or the grandparents would want this to happen to their children. So which then is beyond, most times is beyond the control of the mother, whether that child has FGM or not. So it's very crucial that if women coming from those practicing communities are going back, that they know, because going back to the law, it's illegal if that's performed on their daughters. If they come back, they could still be prosecuted for that. So if you're worried about a child being at risk of FGM, these are some of the things that you could do. You should follow, if you're a professional, usually there are guidelines. Again, I've put this because I wasn't sure who was going to attend. There are usually protocols that you can follow, your child protection protocols. And if it's an emergency, you can call 999 or the NSPCC, and it doesn't matter what if a child is at risk of FGM, I know for some communities, when it comes to dealing with immigration and stuff, you don't know what to do. It doesn't matter under the law. If the child is at risk, although it says that statement that I discussed before, but I think if it comes to the child's safety, they can always use a measure to make sure that that child is saved from the issue of FGM. Finally. That's it.
At least they can easily just type in the effect of FGM, so at least that one can minimize the risks of.
Telling them the effects of FGM.
Yeah.
I think in many countries now, there's a lot of awareness raising of FGM. There are loads of organizations like charities that are doing loads of work on FGM in practicing communities. I think for so long, people were using the wrong strategies. For instance, you are an international NGO, you come to a community, you don't know what they are, and you just come and impose. Sometimes that gets the whole situation wrong. I'll give you a scenario. I worked for UNICEF previously, and there was an NGO that wanted to help a village to have a pump because they had no clean water. So women were going to the villages, to the river to fetch water, to drink, to do everything. So this NGO came in, and then they wanted to give UNICEF money to help this community to build the pump, hand pump, which was great. They came and built the hand pump. 6 months later, we went back for evaluation. The pump was abandoned. Everyone started asking, is it broken? What's going on? No, it's fine. And they decided to ask the men, what's going on? And then the men said, oh, we don't know. The women are just not using it. So the women were asked now, how come you're not using the pump? And they said the only time they have time for themselves to go and gossip is when they go to the river to fetch water. You see, but because they weren't asked, I know, because they were not asked. If they had asked the women, if they had known the culture of those people, they would have known not to put the pump right next to where the men sit. They would have taken it somewhere far. So for so long, international organizations, or with the good intention to come and help, have been using wrong strategies. And I think that has, although change is happening, but slowly. But I think now they're looking at strategies, way to change things to make sure that prevalence of FGM is reducing.
Amen.
And you have more questions coming after all that.
You just leave me in your class.
No, the biggest question is that one because
You
we
feel like the
in
999.
Scotland, we are okay with that one. But if we have to develop these things for all over the world, I think for us affected in Africa, I think we need something down there.
That's what I'm saying. There's things going on down in Africa. There are NGOs, the WHO, all the US agencies.
But it's very hard.
But that's why it's not going to happen over one day. It's going to take time. And we're hoping, like I said, in the next generation, we wouldn't be having these problems.
Hey, on that we'll pass away now.
Yes, but at least our children wouldn't have to worry about it.
Absolutely, and I think just to add to that, as you said, there's a lot of awareness already going on in place, and now trying to work at level of schools as well because of the young people. So by the time they grow up, things are changing compared to earlier on when they didn't know anything, but now because girls are even going to school more than they used to enroll, so it's going to take time, but something is happening. So yeah,
there's a change happening. The UK government has developed this. It's called the Girl Generation. So it's a link between here and Africa. So right now they're working in Kenya, Nigeria, and the Gambia. So they have links where they're encouraging young people to lead the fight. So there's loads of money being pumped in on those.
sustainable.
Since the law is here, since when they have the law against FGM in Scotland, has there been any case?
Not in, the first case we've had in the whole of the UK is just this case that has just collapsed, that the doctor wasn't found guilty. And which is why I'm saying, I think it is important that FGM is illegal, it is made illegal, but I don't think that's the solution. We need that, we need the law, but we need other strategies as well.
But the trouble is, you've got the so-called midwives from Africa coming here to do this operation on kids.
Yeah, well, that's the thing we gather,
That's
but
right.
nobody's
Nobody
coming
has
forward
come out
to report
with
these
whistleblower.
women.
And it's happening.
Yeah, I was just a bit concerned, considering the fact that there is criminalization. To an extent, would that not actually push people to go on the ground?
Yeah.
They will perform it, but because they know that if it's done openly, they're going to be criminalized. So they just go on the ground and carry on the practice. So what would be the best way forward?
I wouldn't say we shouldn't criminalize it, because then it's like saying it's okay for you to do it. Which is why I said it is important to criminalize it, but it is also important to look at other strategies. That, you know, recently we've seen a wave of women from communities, women who've been affected by FGM, coming forward, speaking against it, campaigning against FGM, and you know, the media attention on FGM has been huge, and there's a lot of awareness being raised on the issue of FGM right now in the UK, which is very important, because a few years ago, if you speak to some people about FGM, they're like, what's that? But these days, if anybody you speak to them, they have an idea what it is, even if they don't know into details, but they have an idea. So I think it's very important for awareness raising. It's very important to not stigmatize women who come from, or families who come from these communities, because I've had few people complain that they feel, you know, because for instance, the Scottish Refugee Council's report, which indicates that the most potentially affected community in Scotland are the Nigerians. And some Nigerians have complained that they're not happy about that, because in some parts of Nigeria, when I was going to uni, I was sharing a flag with a Nigerian girl. When I told her my dissertation was on FGM, she had no clue what FGM meant. And she was totally convinced that it doesn't happen in Nigeria. So for people like her, they're like, why would you say that we are most affected? But then we do know that still, it does exist in Nigeria, in certain tribes. And although, if you compare it, for instance, I think Nigeria is about 29% prevalence, or 21? 27. Okay, which is, in a sense, is small.
It's a big number when it's come to the population.
But if you look at the population, it's a huge number.
It's a huge number.
Yeah. So, but you get those as well. Yeah. I don't know what I was talking about until we went there.
I was just going to say, like you say, in Nigeria, that Cameroon has got like 1%,
Mhm.
but the area that is practiced is quite the area that shares boundary with Nigeria. So in that particular border is quite common in that village, in that village. So then that's where 1% actually comes from. Yeah.
But that the refugee council report does acknowledge that we need to bear in mind that it's not representing the whole, and it's particular region and in particular tribes as well.
But like Sierra Leone is any part of the corner of Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
not like one area, no. Every part, the city, the village, everywhere.
Yeah.
And a mixture
Yeah,
of
it's a very
tribes as
strong
well. I mean,
something
you've
there,
got
so-
in Sierra Leone, you've got the Fulani,
Yeah.